everyone. We are so excited to be here today. I'm Julie. I'm the director here at MilSpouseFest, and we are launching our MSF Cast on MilSpouse Entrepreneurship, and we have a fantastic panel today. So give yourselves a pat on the back for taking the time out of your day to come and join us and learn a little bit more about how we can help you on your entrepreneur journey. I'm going to do a quick little screen share here, some slides, and tell you a little bit about who we are and what's going on today and who's going to be talking with you. So, all right. So here we go. So we already told you what we're doing, and we're using Whova, which is a mobile-friendly app, which we love. So if you're logged in today, please go ahead and type your comments, your questions, fill out your poll, do all that in the Whova app. You can download that app on your phone if you haven't already done that after today. And you can go and engage in the exhibitor booths as well and connect with everyone there. So we encourage you to follow us on social media and on our website. We are very active there. We will comment back to you and engage with you, and we share lots of great information about what's going on in the military family space. The best way to keep in touch with MilSpouseFest and learn about our next events, whether that's a live event in person, a virtual event, or one of these webinars, is to sign up for our MSF Connection. That's a bi-weekly newsletter that we send out to all of you. So we hope that you'll sign up for that. It's on our website there if you are on your phone watching and can't scan that. So today, I'm so thrilled to be able to introduce my friend, Jaime Chapman. She's going to be our co-host, and we just thought that this was the perfect person to come and help lead this panel discussion. She is the co-founder and COO of the Military Spouse Chamber of Commerce, and though that is free for military entrepreneur businesses to join. We also are joined with Kate Horrell. She's military family personal financial expert, and she's an accredited financial counselor. She writes a great blog too. So she's been in this MilSpouse employment space for a very long time. And last but certainly not least is Amy Schweizer, the founder and director of Tiny Troops Soccer. So we are really happy that Blue Star Families, we want to give them a shout out, say thank you so much, Blue Star Families, for sponsoring our prizes today. We're going to be giving out an on-time drawing prize, a $15 Starbucks gift card. So that is going to Marlene Paul for being on time today. So cheers to you, Marlene, for being here. Blue Star Families is also donating a $50 swag bag and an HP Chromebook. And so you have to stay on through the whole webinar to be able to be eligible for those prizes. And my shout out to them, and if you're following us on social media, then you will know about this already. They are currently fielding their 2022 military lifestyle survey. So please go look us up on social media and look for that link and fill out that survey. The results from that help all military families in policy situations. So there's my shout out there. So I'm going to turn it over to, I'm going to stop my screen sharing, and I'm going to turn it over to Jaime now to kick off and lead this panel.
Thank you, Julie. And I am so happy to be here moderating today's conversation. I wanted to just really quickly give Amy and Kate a little chance to give a quick, 2-minute intro to themselves, a little bit about their professional background so that you have some context and some situational awareness about the businesses they are running. Kate, if we can start with you, please.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I've been a military spouse for several decades now. And like many of us, when we first got married, every time we went to a new duty station, I sort of reinvented myself and found some new career that I didn't know I had an interest in. And then when we decided to have our first child, given my husband's job at that time, the only logical explanation for us was for me to stay home with the baby. So I stayed home with our children until our youngest was in kindergarten. And then I kind of looked around and I thought, what can I realistically do for my family that is going to give me some professional satisfaction and provide a little income, but is going to work with this lifestyle. And when my first child went to kindergarten, we knew we were moving at the end of that school year. And we also knew my husband was leaving on a 1-year unaccompanied tour at the end of that school year. And so those were the realities of me trying to get back into the workforce. And what that looked like for me was getting a little 1099 job, which somebody had asked a question in the chat about 1099. Anybody who's getting paid by a 1099, you are self-employed, right? You are running your own business, whether it feels like it or not. And that has evolved. My youngest is now 19, so it's been a few years. And this is, grown into this big, overwhelming thing that I have a bunch of clients, and then I do things that are directly for myself. And so I provide personal financial education for military families, and I support other organizations that provide personal financial education. And I have a complicated tax return.
Thank you, Kate. Coach Amy, if you could give us the 2-minute introduction of you.
Sure. Thanks, guys. So I am Amy Schweizer. I'm the founder and director of Tiny Troop Soccer. We operate in 18 states and 3 countries currently. I have been a MilSpouse for 12 years. My husband is in the Marine Corps. We have 3 little boys who run around and keep me very, very busy. My master's degree is in sport management, and I always wanted to work in the community relations department of a professional sports team. So that was always my goal. I met my husband at the age of 27, and fast forward only a year, we got married at the age of 28. So that was a big change for the both of us. And so I fell into Tiny Troops for really, I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't looking to go into entrepreneurship, but the lack of employment opportunities for us all, but particularly in the sports industry, it's not conducive to moving every couple of years, and you have to be in a major city most of the time. So I fell into Tiny Troops that way, and it's grown. It's been a great opportunity for me, and to also employ other military spouses around the world. And Kate, I'd have to say I can probably top your tax return with my 18 states and couple countries in there.
I can't even imagine.
I was on the phone this morning with the accountant, so it's great.
Must be a nightmare to do your taxes. So I'm noticing that we're already having some buzz happen in the chat. So we will be answering some questions for you throughout our conversation. But before we address any of the questions coming in through the comments, I just want to talk about one thing first. So business ownership, we hear a lot of these, stories about how you have to basically give it all up and be an entrepreneur and risk everything. And it's infamous being an entrepreneur because they say it's so difficult. So from you both, I would be curious, what in the world made you turn to entrepreneurship rather than traditional employment? And Amy, I think we just heard a little bit from you, but if you could unpack it for us, getting married, maybe sports doesn't move around. If you can talk about, why didn't you try traditional employment versus opening Tiny Troops?
Yeah, so actually it wasn't for lack of trying, Jamie. So our first duty station was at Camp Pendleton in California, and I found a job through the base that was for like youth sports planning manager. And I'm like, okay, I could do this in my sleep, right? Because, and this is before Tiny Troops, of course, but I've volunteered with youth soccer organizations my whole life. I've worked at the Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers, Big Sisters volunteers. So just everything led up to this. I'm like, yes, a job, like perfect, right? I didn't even get an interview. And I'm like I got the letter. It's like, no, thanks. And I'm like, not to be boastful in this area, but I'm like, no, there probably weren't a lot of people more qualified, and like, what the heck, right? So that kind of kicked off my journey of it. And so that was a traditional part of it that I tried. And I'm like, this is not working. Like, what is, I don't know. And so I had actually, if I'm being honest, before that time in my life, I looked down on unemployment, and I had one of those poor attitudes that thought, if you wanted a job, you could have one. Well, lo and behold, I didn't know the process. So that first year of marriage, I learned the process of unemployment. You have to keep logs of everything you've applied for, and you have to, so, I mean, I had logs of like hundreds of things I had applied for that I was overqualified for and didn't get. And so I did end up going on unemployment that first year of our marriage. because I went from making a salary of, like 50, 60,000 to literally nothing. And so it almost, I was an accidental entrepreneur, but it seemed as if that was my only option, especially as soon as we moved from California, we moved to Okinawa. So that makes it even more limited at that point. So that's kind of where it was at.
And I faced a similar story in my own life when I moved overseas to Germany, but we're not here to talk about me today. So Kate, what made you turn to business ownership? Because in financial planning, that might seem more portable, like you can do financial planning across different industries and states. What made you turn to self-employment instead of traditional employment?
Okay. For me, and anybody who knows me well, I think Julie has heard me lament about this. It's my family always comes first. And that includes 4 children. One of them is special needs. I have a grandfather who's 100, my parents, my in-laws, and particularly given my husband's job, we are all dealing with scheduling issues. The ability to control my own time and my own schedule was absolutely so important to me. And also entrepreneurship has given me not only control over my own schedule on a very day-to-day basis, but also in sort of a bigger peaks and valleys of life space. So if we're going, if we're PCSing, I will cut back on some of the things I'm doing. Or last spring, I had all my kids in college. My husband had recently retired. All of the older people seemed to be sort of under control. And so I picked up a huge contract and worked my tail off for, 4 months straight. But because I do run my own company and I don't have an employer, that was something I could do. Also, I started doing this when remote work wasn't as much of a big deal as it is now. Remote work is definitely a great option for people who don't want to get into entrepreneurship. But typically employers in remote jobs have some sort of concept of like when you're going to show up and maybe your deadlines and things like that. So it's very important to me to be able to create my schedule around what's going to work for our family.
Excellent. So a couple of questions in the chat that are similar to each other. One of them is about specific resources for 1099. And Kate, while you're on, I want you to answer that one. And then just generally any entrepreneurial resources that you might recommend.
Sure. So I encourage people who are looking for some type of job that would be paid by a 1099 to really think about the fact that this is self-employment. There are some gray areas that companies are maybe not exactly following what the law says, and they're paying people as a 1099, even though they're treating them as an employee. And be aware of the fact that that's not how the law is written. I mean, the way the law is written is if you're being treated as a 1099, you are supposed to control your workspace, your work time, how you choose to get your work done. But if you're getting paid as a 1099, you need to think like an entrepreneur, even if you feel like an employee, and maybe you only have one client. And so that's a very employee type relationship, but you really are running a small business. There are a million resources out there. And yet it always seems like there should be 1,000,001 because there's always one resource I can't track down. But the Department of Defense has some great tools to help with this. If you're getting anywhere near, I don't actually know what the qualifications are, but Boots to Business is run through the TAP program, outstanding program. Institute for Veterans and Military Families, run out of Syracuse University, has entrepreneurship training. I have participated in 2 of their programs, and they're really outstanding, and they're no cost to the person participating. The Small Business Administration has a huge variety of resources, and some of them are a little more suited to military people, and some of them are more like traditional, I'm going to go out and open a bakery or something like that.
Amy, do you have any resources you'd like to recommend?
Yeah, for sure. Kate touched on the SBA, so the Small Business Administration, but I always highly recommend the SBDC, the Small Business Development Centers, which are a portion of or a affiliate of the SBA, because I have worked with them from the inception of my business 7 years ago through now. I still have contact with them. I worked with my hometown people originally, and I've gone through all the different states. So currently I am affiliated with the UNC, the North Carolina Small Business Development Center at UNC. And they have so many resources. So they help you with everything. And one that was really awesome was they have students, so masters of accounting and different things that need projects. And so they'll utilize that for their entrepreneurs. So like I had a whole financial review, like meetings with these people for free that you would have to pay a lot of money to typically get. They also always have a lot of free webinars. And so I get those emails once a month. I say, okay, like this would be good, this would be good. And I even will assign my staff out to those because it's free for anybody, anybody can sign up. So I utilize that a lot. Also reading. I love to read business books and see what I can pull out of those. One of my favorite ones that really helped me establish, like Kate was mentioning, like this is a business, I need to start getting systems and treat it like a business, is Traction. I'm looking at my bookshelf here. I can't think of the author, but the book is called Traction. Gene Wickman, I think is his name. And so that really helps set up like the true structure of the business. So I would definitely check those out.
Excellent. Thank you both. And now it's just a great time to mention some of the work the Military Spouse Chamber is doing, because the Small Business Administration came up a couple of times when you were recommending some resources. The Chamber does a lot of advocacy work, and I just want to make you all aware that there's a couple of bills we've floated out. We have no decision yet on whether they'll pass or not, but the first one is to recognize military spouses as a category with the government for government contracting. And then the other is for reimbursement. So every time you relocate, if you do have a business and you need to, say, reestablish your LLC in a new state, there's little fees that come along with that. And this other bill would be to give military spouse business owners a reimbursement every time they PCS for those business related costs. So just keep an eye out. We'll be making announcements through the chamber on the status of those two pieces of legislation should they go forward. And then also we'll be reaching out and asking for support on those different things. So just wanted to mention that work. It's really crucial to get recognized by the government in a lot of different areas. And also we do a lot of work in the private sector for recognition of military spouse-owned businesses. So I'm really proud of that work that we do, but I just wanted to mention that briefly since the SBA came up a couple of times. There was a question about food-based businesses. The one small tip I might have for you is wherever do you live? Is it on base or off base? What city, state, and county do you live in? Every single government entity, local, federal, and state will have different food regulations that you need to look at. And it's better to be more on the cautious side. And if you need certain food and safety handling permits and things like that, just to be aware of it. Also, I'm happy to connect with you offline. That's a very popular business among military spouses to do baking and other types of food-based businesses from home.
Let me just throw out a little tip for food-based businesses. I've not run one. I have 14 ideas in my head, but my best friend owns a restaurant, and sometimes you can borrow kitchen space from restaurants. So if you're in a location that you're not permitted to do your food-based business at home, start reaching out to some of your small restaurants, and you might be working at 4 o'clock in the morning, but you also might be able to get a really good deal on kitchen space.
Well, and it depends on which branch of the military you're in and where the heck you're stationed, but some larger metro areas also have like shared commercial kitchen space. You can almost use it like a co-working space and rent space. And I have a couple of businesses that I've worked with that utilize these kind of co-working shared commercial kitchens and things like that. But it just depends. If you're like me, I'm stuck out here in the middle of Fort Hood, Texas. There's probably not one of those where I live. So it's very, regionally specific. Okay, so I want to ask another question. You're both business owners. The lion's share of the folks that we're tuning in today are either new in owning a business or they're just exploring if it's a good fit. So when you were creating your business, how did you determine what service or what product that you wanted to offer to the world? And, kind of talk us through the steps that you took to kind of realize this pipe dream you had in your head and make it happen in real life.
Do you want to go, Amy?
Sure, I'll go. So mine started from my passion for soccer. So I am a lifelong soccer player. Well, I say lifelong, but I actually didn't ever touch a soccer ball until I was 16 because girls soccer was not a thing in my area in Illinois. And so they came to our basketball team and said, we want to start this team. Do you guys want to do it because you're athletic? And we're like, sure, why not? And so it was kind of a joke, but happened to be the sport I loved the most and happened to end up being the best at. So I played that throughout life, and I got to play in the WUSL for a while. So it was a passion of mine already. It came about because there's a need for me as a businesswoman to want to be doing something besides being at home as a mom, which of course I love doing, but having that passion for working, that was a real big change and kind of setback for me, that it just wasn't setting right with me, that I wasn't doing anything. But then also at the time I had a 2-year-old little guy at home with me, and I think he was going crazy, right? Like he needed socialization. He wasn't in preschool yet. He wasn't in daycare. So he needed socialization. He needed physical activity. He needed to be out with other people besides me. And so that's kind of how it started. And then more and more people just kept wanting to come to these soccer practices. And I realized, okay, everyone's feeling the same way as I am, because not only was it good for the kids, but it was good for the spouses to be able to get out and talk with other people, just be with other adults and things. And so it kind of spurred from that. And then I did do a little research in the fact that most base sports started at age 5 at that point. And so there was nothing to do for that younger age. And so I kind of combined all those factors, and really then the demand just kept driving it and turned it into what it is today.
That's awesome. So unbeknownst to you, you were tapping into this kind of market need of people like me. I have a 5-year-old who just turned 5, and I have a 2-year-old, and there really isn't anything to do with those kids. And, they get bored. So what about you, Kate? What made you take this pipe dream and then kind of figure out what you wanted to serve to the world?
I really fell into this. So I don't know that my exact journey would provide a lot of lessons for people, except for 2 things. One of which is I really opened myself up to a lot of possibilities. I came into this completely backwards. Somebody that my husband was worked with, I was at an event and I was talking to his wife, and, I really struck up a conversation and said, I'm looking to get back into the workforce. And she said, oh, I have this thing, maybe you could help me with. And it was completely new to me. Who'd ever heard of a blogger? And then at some point that turned into an opportunity that somebody was looking for a person with with a financial background to do some education. And I don't know if I love or hate this term, but I really leaned into that. And I was like, hey, I could totally do that. I had zero idea whether or not I could do that when I said those words. But I figured that I was going to give it my best try. And so those are 2 things from my story, even though it was all happenstance, that I think were integral parts of that happenstance happening.
Yep. And my own entrepreneurial journey was sort of like Amy. I just had a specific area of expertise where I lived and ate and breathed every day in my traditional employment. And I ran basically I call it human capital as a service, anything in career coaching or resume writing, staffing, human resources and recruitment. My whole career has been in that kind of ballpark. So that ended up being what my business was in when I was in Germany, found myself unemployed. So I just turned what I knew and, was kind of working with similar clients that I had worked with in the past in the private sector and figured out a way to monetize it. So I want to talk about something else. I'm going to talk about PCSing, right? So I personally, I've had 14 addresses in the last 16 years, and having a career that fits in a suitcase is not a luxury that I've always had. And so, you know, I took jobs when I could. I made good money sometimes. I made terrible money sometimes. I opened a business. I've done pretty much everything there is to do in my career because of the good old fashioned PCS move, right? So I want to talk about anything that stands out to you as a specific benefit or maybe as a specific challenge that comes along with running a business and also PCSing. Amy, if you want to start.
I'm kind of chuckling, so it just reminds me of I've spoken with a lot of base officials because we operate in so many different locations. And so one of my quotes to them is always, what viable business can go 3 to 6 to 9 to 2 years at some bases? I'm waiting to have approval to continue to run my business on base. You know, that's just not, that doesn't make sense. That's not possible. So anyhow, I think it depends on the type of business when you're PCSing. And gosh, Jamie, I got worked up about that, thinking about that. So tell me your question again. I apologize.
Maybe some benefits and also some challenges that come along with the PCSing for your business.
Yeah. So the challenge would be, you know, finding new locations if that works for you. So the benefit, I think, of it is that you get to explore different areas, and different areas have different markets. So your business might have not have done so well where you were previously, but then it booms in this market. So that's something, is that we get to see the difference, you know, because if you just stayed in the same town, the same state your whole life, you wouldn't know that. But I was really surprised just seeing the different markets and different geographical locations and how that corresponds to my business.
Okay. Kate, what about you?
I think the biggest challenge I have found is trying to get accurate information about, have I set myself up appropriately for the place that we're located now? Do I need to move my LLC from where I am? If I'm overseas, does my SOFA status permit me to do what I'm doing? And I think since we've all lived overseas, right, we all recognize that that is a huge challenge, because the SOFA agreements are written in such vague terms, and they typically say things like, you can work or you can't work. Okay, well, that's not very helpful. Or, okay, if you can go get a job for, let's say, a German company, and I'm not claiming to know the German rules, but I was just reading them and I'm trying to understand them. You can go get a job for a German company, but you need to do X, Y, and Z. So it doesn't say anything about what if my job is still in America. Or it might talk about self-employment, but it's self-employment it's sometimes quite clear from the rules that the self-employment rules don't apply to the kind of business that you're running. And I think we've all experienced it. This is a huge challenge for military spouses. I actually found out at one point in time that I had been doing something that was not within the rules retrospectively. And I thought, wow, gosh, I wouldn't have done that had anybody had any idea what they were talking about. So that is, for me, the biggest challenge. Obviously, the benefit, though, is, I don't know if this is a benefit that you get to work through the PCS. But when you get to the end and you're ready to really jump back into your business, it's already there. You're not, you know, filling out those resumes and getting held up by the federal hiring keyword search system, or, you know, whatever illogic made Amy not eligible, qualified for that job.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. I always recommend going to base legal. Like, take your body physically there. Go. You can set up a free appointment and talk to them, particularly overseas, to find out, so they can, you know, tell you what all that jazz means in the SOFA agreement. Write down who you spoke to, the date, the time, the name. Not that that always matters, because I've had people say, well, that was incorrect. However, you then can operate on good faith that, you know, you did your due diligence in what was being said. And if that was wrong, like, you weren't purposefully breaking any rules or doing something you weren't supposed to.
I agree. I at one point spent about 4 hours in the JAG office, just and fortunately it was a friend. So we were really exploring like every angle of well, if I use my mailbox to get a paycheck, does that count? I don't know. Let's pull out the rules, because it is very nuanced.
Yep. So there was a comment or a question in the chat about have you owned a business at various duty station? And I believe for all three of this, the answer is overwhelmingly yes. So my experience, I had started a business in Colorado, PCS, moved to Germany, also PCS, moved to Texas, and had to reestablish my business legally each time I did that. And then I also had started a nonprofit in Texas. And in general, it makes a difference if you're operating in base housing on the base, or if you live off base, then you're just, it just depends. Like overseas in Germany, for example, if you were living basically on your BAH, but you lived off of the base, then you had to abide by the base rules for a home-based business. And every city I went to in Germany, every base said a different thing, and there's not a lot of continuity. And so I love Amy's advice about just kind of documenting and making sure you said, hey, I tried to ask around, try to do the right thing. And here's my notes from that conversation. Because when I came to Fort Hood, I was actually really surprised. You look on Facebook and there's thousands of business owners in the business pages, around this area. And Fort Hood has roughly 100,000 people affiliated with it in some capacity. But when I went to the base office to register my business, there were only 10 registered business on the base, and 2 of them ended up being mine, the nonprofit and the for-profit that I own. So just always try to do the right thing first and foremost. And it's a little bit challenging sometimes, but seek counsel from military spouses who are local that have also done it too, to see what they have found. Okay. I had a question, and I think there were 2 questions from the same person about if you've never owned a business, what kind of business should I start? And then something like an MLM, like Selling Sensei or Color Street, would that even count as owning a business? So I would like to say to the latter half of that question, if you're operating an MLM and you're selling something on behalf of another company, you are self-employed. I believe they pay you in a 1099 capacity. And as Kate mentioned earlier, yes, you're self-employed at that point. You've got to represent a brand and a product and really hustle to do a good job doing those things. And so then I want you 2 ladies to answer the first part of that, which is, if I've never owned a business before, what type of business might be a good place to start?
Gosh, I'll jump in, Kate. So I feel like that cliche is like, if you do what you love, it's not work. I feel like that's true, especially starting a business as an entrepreneur. Things can be so up and down. If I didn't truly believe that our kids, particularly our military kids, needed physical activity in their life to counteract the childhood obesity rates we have going on, all the video gaming, but also to boost the mental health, because we know our kids especially need that. So if I didn't truly believe that I was serving these kids and I was doing that, I think there would have been multiple times where I'd been like, forget this. I had months of those 2 a.m. nights or 4 a.m. and then get up with my kids at 6 a.m., all that stuff. So all of that to say, do something that you're at least slightly interested in. Explore, Google, like, what are good businesses to start with, and see, get a list and then say, okay, I kind of like that. I kind of like that. And then look into each of those fields a bit to see if, to learn about it first, to see like, what does this require? Because some people think, just like, I'm going to start a blog and I want to monetize it. Well, okay, how many times are you posting? What type of content? Are you following a content tracker? All these things. It's not just, let's just start it and see what happens. So do your research, explore, but ultimately, hopefully it's something you are at least interested in.
I would say the answer varies just a little bit depending on what your purpose is for starting this business. If you are really trying to build a business and make income, and then I would encourage people not only to choose something that they're passionate about, but also to start not with doing what you're going to do, but with coming up with the structure of your business and learning how businesses run. And most importantly, finding a way to test whether or not there's even a market for your business. Just doing this in small steps. Now, if this is more of a hobby business, which is still a business, then maybe you could jump a little bit more feet in if you aren't concerned about necessarily turning a profit the first year or even the first 5 years. The IRS might have something to say about that, but you may be able to take a few more risks if this is more something you're doing for your own enjoyment. But either way, if you don't have a passion for it, like Amy said, you're going to burn out if you don't love what you're doing.
Yep, burnout is real. I am with the Military Spouse Chamber now, and I also have a job at a Fortune 10 company as well. But I burned out in entrepreneurship, and this is going to lead into some of the other content I wanted to talk to you both about. We had some specific questions in the chat. I'm going to table those for like 10 minutes, and then we'll answer the questions. There was about document translation and about base legal. So we'll table that for about 10 minutes. We're going to have a little bit deeper of a discussion, and then we'll get back to your questions. So I burned out. I was, like I said, moved from Colorado with my business to Germany with my business. I ran a successful business. I was making money. And then I ended up, having one kid, pregnant with my second kid during a pandemic, PCSing while I was pregnant with my kid during a pandemic. And it was just a nightmare. And I said, you know what? I have enjoyed my run. I owned that business for 6 years, but I'm tired. I need to find something else and take a mental break. So I burned out. I just basically stopped my business when I had my second child, and it's technically still open, and I'm hanging on to it just for maybe the sentimentality of it all. But I haven't done any business really through that LLC I own since my son was born, and he's almost 2. And so I burned out. I was tired of it, but I think everybody goes through these normal life cycles, and running a business or not, it's just something. That cycle was over in my life, and I was pursuing something different now. And I feel a lot happier for it. But I also have some other business ideas I might also do in the future. So more to follow on that. I'm very entrepreneurial spirited, and I've got these ideas that are just burning a hole in my pocket. So
that's the problem with our types, right? We're like, oh, I have an idea. I could turn this into a business. I could turn this.
I like generate so many business ideas. I write them down thinking I might sell this one day, just the idea, and then somebody else can run it. So, but I want to talk about just hardship. I want to talk about times that really, really tested you, because you're both still running a business. And so we'll start with Amy, because you're on the screen anyway. But talk about a time you almost threw in the towel. What was going on? And what about that situation have you clung to? What have you kept, you almost threw in the towel, because I know you probably have. And then what about that situation have you held on to that's made you better for it in the end?
So I don't think there's one particular thing, but just staffing has always been an issue for me. We primarily employ military spouses purposefully. I want to do that with my business. But so we have a high turnover, PCSing, childcare, lack of childcare, or my spouse was supposed to be home. We all know that's a lie, right? But there's nothing you can do about that. And that's why it's so hard for us to maintain employment as spouses. But I think just that challenge has been, some points I'm like, you know what, forget it. Like, I'm just not going to have a business at all. Like, I can't keep restaffing. But for me, again, the purpose of what I'm doing is something I love. Also, the business aspect of it is something that is able to allow me to contribute financially to my family. So that's another reason to get through it. And also just, I think I just personally have the characteristic of like, that didn't work, I'm going to find another way. Like, I don't like the no factor. I'm like, you know what? Okay, I'm going to keep going. I know this can work. I know somehow it's going to work. I think it's hard for our type because I want it to work now, and you have to test things for 90 days and then test it again. And then you're still not there. Right. And so that like kills me. But that was my challenge. But I think you just have to be committed to making it work. And also how you said though, Jaime, knowing when enough's enough, I'm good with this, I'm content with where it is, I want to pass it off, or I want to let it go.
Kate, what about you? A time you almost threw in the towel. What about that, time have you taken with you, and what did you learn from overcoming that challenge?
Um, I think what you said about burnout is very real. There have been a few times along the way that I just really thought, like, I don't know how I can do this anymore. One benefit is, if you're self-employed, if you need to spend 3 days on your sofa, your boss is not going to yell at you. But then to look back at it and go, how did I get to that point? How did I get to a point that my only reaction was to sit on the sofa for 3 days? And was it a problem with work-life balance? Am I trying to do too much in the workspace? Have I gotten into some work relationships that maybe aren't healthy and are causing unnecessary stress? I have a very small, limited number of employees. So for me, it's typically clients. But if you have employees, it only takes one employee relationship that's difficult to really impact your entire kind of psyche. And it's also true of clients. If you have one client that's not working out, that client really can just impact your entire business. So I've learned to be more conscientious about who I'm doing business with and how much work I'm taking on, and hopefully keeping the right balance between my family life and my work life.
That's excellent. My issues of burnout were people-centric. And I think when it comes to hiring a team, that's exceptionally difficult, no matter what kind of business that you're in. But one thing about the military spouses I know, through the chamber, we've collected data, and 98% of military spouse business owners say that should they need to hire someone, they would consider hiring another military spouse. But as Amy said, there's inherent problems that can come with hiring other military spouses, which we're all bleeding hearts for, because we can yes a lot. And it's different depending on the kind of business it is. If it's a virtual business and they can do it from home, then it's going to be probably easier to hang on to them. But in Amy's case, to be a soccer coach, you have to be boots on the ground at a physical location where the team is. And so that makes it a little bit more challenging. But my burnout came directly from people-centric issues. I had a great team, but that was ultimately like what unraveled me and made me lose my mind in the end. So keep that in mind when you're running a business. And if you want to grow your team, people can be the biggest blessing and help you amplify and grow and scale your business and help you make a lot more money and be a force amplifier. Or if you hire the wrong people, then it can be a stress catalyzer. It can make it even worse. So
yeah, sorry, Jaime, I wanted to add to that. It's important to have your values established and hire by those values, which if you told me that when I first started out, that wasn't the case, right? But I have learned, and so advice for you all that are listening, start with your values, think what are important to me? What do I want my business, like what do I want to be known for? What's important to me personally? And then apply that to your business. And what is my business? What do I want my business to be known for? So if you start hiring correctly, or as much as you can, that's one way to get you in the right direction, on the right foot. And then also to keep in mind, because it's so easy to focus on that one customer who's continuously complaining, or the one, this employee quit or came late or whatever it is. But I have 50 other employees who are doing awesome and pouring into the kids. And I have, 15,000 customers who love it and think this is a great opportunity for their kids. So it's like really like putting it into perspective, like this one, like let it go, serve them the best you can, bless and release at some point, right? And then focus on the ones you have that are doing well.
That's great. In the Army, they call that hunting the good stuff. So last call for any questions you may want to drop in. We're coming up on the time where I want to focus on any questions that you may have as you watch. So please drop those questions in the chat in the Whova app. And please just, we have a few minutes here towards the end of our conversation to answer those questions. I want to revisit the comment I had gotten about, do any of you need documents translated when you PCS to Europe? I didn't. Whenever I PCS to Europe, I had the good old Google Translator app on my phone, because in Germany, I had to deal with the German Finanzamt, which is their financial office. And I also had a military spouse who was like a German tax attorney that I worked with to help me with all of that stuff. And I just need to like have her read my letters to me, because that wasn't too bad. But did either of you have to have documents translated?
I didn't have to do that, but I would rely on Google. When we were in Japan, there was some app, and like I would have to go to the sporting goods store and buy by goals. And so I would be in there for like 2 hours because we're going back and forth through this app trying to figure out. So do what you got to do. Yeah, but no, I haven't had that specifically.
Okay. And there's another question. I don't personally know the answer to it, but it was, can retiree spouses use the base legal for business advice? And I don't know, you have your ID, you're probably still in the DEER system as a beneficiary or something like that, but I don't know if you can. I would be calling and trying to get them to answer my questions on the phone. But have either of you retired?
We are retired. I have not used Base Legal for business advice. Base Legal is available to retirees. The availability of Base Legal has, since the COVID situation, has gotten tough. I did a little research for an article, and like apparently they're triaging and prioritizing right now to the point that like if you're not deploying, we're not going to get to your will. You maybe want to go somewhere else. So I certainly wouldn't rely on that. If you're overseas, which I think might be what the question was about, call them, but don't be surprised if the answer is that that's outside of their purview.
I feel like I saw someone post recently, and I apologize, I don't have the specifics, but does Military OneSource have some, I feel like they have some sort of legal center. I don't know how complex it is. I don't know if it's just answering questions, but I know they have something where you can get documents and templates that I just recently found out about it. So maybe Julie or Maria can check into that later and post for you guys.
Yeah, so if this is about the retiree question, retirees lose their access to Military OneSource after 365 days. So if you're going to do it, just like many things, do it fast.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thanks for that, Kate.
No, who would know?
We haven't retired, so I have no idea. And I want to clarify too, there's many resources out there that are not government resources, especially some of the nonprofits out there that will continue to serve the spouses of retired military. I know that when we created the chamber, we included everybody. We don't care about your marriage status. We don't care about your military status. It's the kind of concept, once a military spouse, always a military spouse. So if nothing else, come to the Military Spouse Chamber and we'll try to help you if you need questions and you're a retiree spouse that's having a hard time with resources. Okay, let me see if we have any more comments here. Oh, we do. Okay. I am in the business startup phase and my expenses are outpacing our savings. Do you have any recommendations for funding sources to help, specifically with coach training, not higher ed? So that's a pretty loaded question, but I think the gist of it is, do you have any funding resources that you know of?
So one thing I found since COVID, prior to COVID, a lot of nowhere you couldn't really find a grant for-profit businesses, but since COVID, there's been a lot more. And so I know I've seen a lot from Hello Alice. That's a resource for small businesses. So they post a lot in there. I've literally Googled small business grants for sports, small business grants for women, like just Google and see what you find. You do get a lot of junk in there, but some of them are really good. Also, your local SBDC will be able to, if you're on their list, you'll get that email they provide when it's open. Also, your local city, maybe even like my business is based out of my hometown. So I can use grants from my hometown. And a lot of people got COVID money specifically for that. So I would check with your city and county as well.
I would recommend people reach out to, as I mentioned before, the Institute for Veterans and Military Families at Syracuse University. If you do, I don't know the exact structure of like what action makes you eligible for what benefit, but they do have connections to specific loan programs or a trademark attorney that will help you get your trademark done for a reduced, you still have to pay the, the patent office money, but they cover the cost of the attorney side of things. And like other people have said, different resources like the chamber can just point you like, oh, you need this. I know about this program. So just take advantage of all the stuff that's out there.
One financial book that I love that I wish I would have started and knew about at the beginning of my business is Profit First by, can't see it from here, but Profit First is an excellent book, and that'll help keep you in line and actually paying yourself so you don't spend 5 years just not making anything and investing it all back into the business.
Great recommendation. Really quick question for you, Amy. Do you have Tiny Troop Soccer around FLW? I think that's Fort Leonard Wood.
Leonardwood. I don't know. So I think it's Missouri or Kansas, one of those two. We've looked into it, but we don't. But that's also one aspect of our business. I would love to start everywhere we can, but I have to register as a foreign LLC in every state. So you have payments that come along with that. You're signing up for unemployment, so you're with the Department of Labor in that state. You have sometimes franchise. I'm not a franchise, but you have sometimes sales and use taxes or franchise taxes, depending on the state. And so we really have to explore where we're going to open. And we look at, for example, California, there's a lot of bases there. So that would make sense for us to be there. Missouri maybe has 1 or 2 viable options, so it may not make sense for us to be there. So it's on the list. Send us a message and we'll check into it.
There was a really specific question. I'm going to ask it, but it's okay if we don't know the answer. So this person says, I've been buying china in Germany and I have an idea for a rental biz. What's the first thing I should do? I think that we could probably use a little more clarity to the person that put that comment in. So if you can come in with a different comment and say, hey, I've been buying this product or whatever in Germany and China, what should I do next? Give us some clarity on that question. We have a few more minutes and then we're going to close out here at the top of the hour. So I will move to the next question for the sake of time, and hopefully you'll drop your clarity in for us so we can get to your question. This one is a great question as well. It says, I'm all about hiring and supporting military spouses. How do you handle the training of someone who might leave as soon as they get into the rhythm?
Yeah, I can speak to this. So as an employer, I get it. You spend time, money, resources into training people. When they leave, it can be devastating to your business. As someone who has looked for a job as a military spouse, I want a job if I want a job, right? So, I mean, it is a very double-edged sword. However, I will say how you handle that is systemize your business. So even if it's just you right now, write down how I answer the email and whatever it is you do that you personally do, write it down so that, and write it down, have them create their manual. So every position in my company has a manual. And I say you update, anytime you add a duty, take away a duty, that gets updated. And the point of that is, so if someone has to leave, say they just said, I'm leaving right now. And we're all like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what this person does. We have a manual that can get us to where we need to go. And also when we hire someone, we're prepared for them to know what they need to do. So systemize.
Okay, I'm going to come back and read the answer from Judy about the rental with the China. She said she wants, in general, if she wants to start her own business, what's the first thing that you do when you decided you wanted to start a business? She said she feels like it's semi-overwhelming.
Yes. What I would just say is do a quick temperature check and figure out, where do I live? Am I on a base? What city do I live in? What county and what state? Every state has resources to help you set up a business legally where you are. But more importantly, you can start ugly, as I've heard it said. And you can do work without forming a business at all under the umbrella of being a sole proprietor. And Kate probably knows more about this than I do, but you can get started and basically this doing research, and I can't explain each type of business entity out there, but a sole proprietor is just like you're operating as Jaime Chapman, the individual, while your, quote unquote business wouldn't have any liability protection or anything. If you're just getting your feet wet, you can go ahead and start as an individual, as a sole proprietor. And then if you decide, hey, now I'm not as overwhelmed, let me form, let's say, an LLC or whatever type of business, works for you, then you have to find out what physical location you're at, because every state and every county and every military installation has different registration requirements. I have overviewed almost 100 business applications for folks that are military spouses certifying their businesses with the chamber. And I have a really good beat on the pulse of how to register a business. That might be a better question to get with me. Just send me an email or send me a note so I can help you. Anybody else?
I would say definitely look at where you are located, but I personally would not start doing any business until I had checked out the legal ramifications, for my location, because at least in the places I've lived, the structure of my business is irrelevant to what the laws are. What applies to the law is what activities I'm participating in. So whether I'm doing that as Kate Horrell or I'm doing that as King's High Media LLC, if the activity is regulated, the activity is regulated. And so, yeah, the biggest thing is to just make sure whatever you're doing it within the laws for your jurisdiction.
I have some advice, y'all, that I'm debating sharing, and Julie's probably never going to ask me back for this. But sometimes you have that. It's better to ask forgiveness than permission. And gosh, nobody go to jail over this, right? But sometimes it's like, just go ahead and start. I think we do get so overwhelmed and in all the X, Y's, and Z's, and there's this and that, and there's so many things, and then you scare yourself into forget it, I'm never doing anything. Test the waters a bit, and if you think, okay, I think this could be viable, I think this could be something, then go ahead and do the formation. Don't hate me, Julie.
Well, and you asked a very loaded question, because we all three gave a very different answer. So, but we're all more than welcome. I'm just offering you both up as a resource as well. If you have any questions and need to ask specifically, feel free to reach out to us afterwards. But Julie, I believe you needed a couple of minutes here towards the end to close us all out. So I want to thank everyone for your time today. Thank the speakers here today for your time and your wisdom and for sharing it with everyone. And Julie, it's back to you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate your time today and your willingness to engage in the comments. So this app will actually be open all month. You guys can still reach out and connect. If you go and visit the community board area, you're going to see a whole lot of questions. We had a webinar 2 weeks ago that Jaime also led that panel discussion on. We started a LinkedIn thread. So if you want to connect with anyone you met here today, hop on over to that community board and drop your LinkedIn, and we can connect with everyone there. So I'm going to go ahead and remove everybody's spotlights. I really appreciate the time, and we've gotten some great feedback in the chat that everyone loved the conversation. There were so many resources shared, and they just really it resonated with everyone. The last thing that I want to tell you before I read off the prizes is you can share this content with your friends. So we record this today, and this is going to go up on our YouTube channel. So if you're not following us on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we'll be able to put this right here in the Whova app. So if you have a friend that who registered and didn't get in, they can come in and still watch it. But then you can also share it out that way. And so who's ready to hear the prize winners? Thanks again to Blue Star Families for their sponsorship of these. Sherry Beery, you are the winner of the Blue Star Family swag bag. So congratulations. And I don't know how to pronounce your name properly. So the Chromebook winner, Masu Mateo, Macu Mateo. So our team will reach out to you through Whova. They'll send you a note. We'll get your address and we'll send that over to our contact, Laura Torres. She's got a virtual exhibitor booth here too with Blue Star Families with Spouse Force, if anyone's looking for employment stuff that's not entrepreneurs. That is a wrap for today. Thanks everyone so much. We will be back in August 25th for a webinar about MilSpouse education. And then going into September, we're going to talk about children's education issues. But for now, we're going to take a little pause this summer and hope you guys enjoy your PCSing or wherever it is that you're going out on your travel. So thanks again, everybody.